Ben Carson giving a speech at Andrews University back in 1998, and that's a Seventh-day Adventist university. He's Seventh-day Adventist, talking about the Egyptian pyramids, and he says something blatantly wrong and absolutely preposterous. Let's watch.
My own personal theory is that Joseph built the pyramids in order to store grain. Now, all the archaeologists think that they were made for the pharaohs' graves, but you know, it would have to be something awfully big when you stop and think about it. I don't think it would just disappear over the course of time to store that much grain. And, you know, various scientists have said, well, you know, there were alien beings that came down and they had special knowledge, and that's how they were able to, you know, it doesn't require an alien being when God is with you, you know?
No, I don't know. First of all, there are no scientists who say that the aliens built the pyramids. None. Now, could there be a kooky scientist somewhere in the world who thinks that? Yeah, I guess. Anything in a scientific journal printed about how the aliens built the pyramids? I mean, look at his view of scientists. Dude, that's not science. Because once you've, again, left the plane of logic, well, you're in la-la land. Anything, it could have been the pyramids. It could have been the aliens built. It could have been Alf. It could have been E.T. You know, it was a Predator. It was a Terminator. Hard to tell, right? So, no, he says, that's ridiculous. That's not true. Of course aliens didn't build the pyramids. The sky god did. Oh, I see. Okay, and so he's trying to relate it to this story in the Bible in Genesis of Joseph, who was in Egypt, and there was a 7-year famine, but he had stored up all this grain. And so according to Kooky Carson here, he thinks, okay, he stored it up in the pyramids, right? And then what archaeologists, first of all, that's not true. I'll get to that in a second, their exact thoughts on that. That's not how the pyramids are built. That's not why they were built. That's not what was in the pyramids. We know. We have the artifacts. We know what was in the pyramids. Second of all, when archaeologists go to study whether there was a Joseph or 7 years of surplus and then 7 years of famine, and then there was this guy who had the grain for everybody in the 7 years of famine, there's no such thing. There's no records of that. And back in the day, they kept a lot of records. I know it's a long time ago, but they would write down the amount of grain that was sold, who bought it, who sold it, what was the current situation, was there a war going on, was there a drought going on. They kept records of all this stuff. There's no talk of Joseph, there's no Moses. Israeli archaeologists went trying to find some references to a character that maybe not named Moses, but did something along the lines of Moses. Maybe he didn't split the Red Sea, but he had had a fight with the pharaohs, something, anything that would acknowledge what happened in the Old Testament. Nothing. There is no record of any Moses doing any of those things. It didn't rain frogs. None of it is true. I know that a lot of you think that, well, that offends me. Okay, but there's nothing I can do about that. So it's like me telling you that math is correct, and you tell me, well, that math offends me. Well, it can offend you, but 2 + 2 still equals 4. Even if it offends you, it's still 4. It ain't 5, it ain't 6, it's still 4. So that's a sad day for you that it offends you. So, okay, now there's some of you who say, hey, wait, Cenk, now. That was back in 1998. That's not fair. You can't go back there. I mean, back then he might have had different thoughts, but now he's evolved more and he's, running for president. He's a Republican. There's no evolving, okay? So they asked him about it on Wednesday. Here's what he said.
The video has resurfaced from 1998 at Andrews University where you mentioned that the pyramids, in your opinion, were used to store grain from the biblical times, repeating what the archaeologists believe in doing.
It's still my belief, yes.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, well, the pyramids were made in a way that they had hermetically sealed compartments. You wouldn't need hermetically sealed compartments for a sepulcher. You would need that if you were trying to preserve grain over a long period of time.
Ooh, interesting point. Except it's not true at all. So the press went to talk to archaeologists, such as Professor of Egyptian Art and Archaeology at Johns Hopkins, Betsy Bryan. Here's how she explained it. The actual space available within the pyramids of any era was highly limited. Far more was devoted to descending and ascending shafts. These would be highly unsuitable for grain storage in large amount. No basis in fact. In fact, they went to another professor from Yale, J.G. Manning, and he said about this theory, quote, it just has no basis in fact. It's just not true. There was no grain in there. It was built for the pharaohs. They asked Professor Manning, how would you describe a theory that it was actually Joseph from the Bible that stored grain in there? He described it very simply as this: lunatic theory. Now, look, this guy's running for president. And so some of the mainstream media are worried about it. Gotcha questions. You know, can we ask this of people? Should we judge them based on that? We don't want to offend the religious people in this country. But we're going to elect a guy who's going to be the most powerful man on earth. And he believes things that aren't remotely true. He lives in a completely altered reality where archaeologists, all of them, are in cahoots. 100% of the archaeologists in the world decided to do a conspiracy to hide the fact that Joseph had in fact stored the grain in those pyramids, and then in the 7 years of famine, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, right? So, I mean, I know they deny climate change because they get paid by the oil companies. I know that they say 97% of the world's scientists in regards to climate change are lying and are part of a global conspiracy, et cetera, right? But now they've gone to archaeology, and they just refuse to acknowledge things that are scientifically established. So, okay, if you want to vote for that, fine, but understand that you're purposely on the side of stupid, on the side of ignorance. You're wrong. There's no dispute over it. So you want to say, hey, I'm proud to vote for an idiot that doesn't know anything about facts, and I'd like to have him in charge of the nuclear football and the ability to blow up the entire planet. God knows what's going through the lunatic mind of Ben Carson. And you see, in Genesis and Revelation, it says that Armageddon will come when I press the nuclear button. And I destroy the Middle East, and Jesus will come back. You don't think he thinks that? I don't know. I don't know what he thinks, because he's not in the reality-based world. How do you talk to a guy like that? You want to make that guy president and commander-in-chief and in charge of the biggest military the world has ever seen? You're just as nuts as him if you're thinking about voting for this guy. He is leading among the Republicans now. #1 in the national polls on the Republican side. If there is a God, God help us all.